the Lord, the God of Abraham and your father Isaac. I will give this land to you and your descendants. They will be as countless as the specks of dust on the ground. And you will spread far and wide, to west and east, to north and south.
Here. Let's poke around the text of Jacob's dream at Bethel in Genesis 28, 10-14, and begin to demonstrate how seminarians and seminary graduates give a close, careful, questioning, probing reading of biblical texts. We'll start with verse 10. I'm using the Olive Tree Bible app here. It's available for iPhone, Androids, Macs, PC. We have mention of Beersheba and Haran. Let's not let these geographical names just fly over our heads, but poke around and ask what this itinerary signifies. Haran, for example, if you don't know, we could learn that it's the place where Abraham first migrated when he left Babylonia. That means that in a sense, Jacob is going back to the family homestead, turning back in time, in some way regressing to a previous phase of the migration towards the promised land. We might want to think about what that might involve and entail. Then he came to a certain place. You might want to check the Hebrew here just to be sure that it is in fact just any place. So if we take a look at the Hebrew, what in fact we find is that it is ha-makom, the place. That's kind of interesting, especially since we're going to soon find out that this just isn't any place, but this is what you might call a thin place, this place where the transcendent is close by the terrestrial. And indeed, if you look up makom here in the Halot lexicon, it can often simply mean a location. But if you go down the list, you soon discover that one possibility, definition number 6, is a sacred site. So the idea that Jacob came to not just any old place, but to the place, which may allude to this being a sacred site, that's interesting. It's interesting to poke around and define that sort of thing. All right, we'll keep going. Of course, the nature of this ladder in verse 12 is going to be very interesting. It's not really a word for a ladder. The Hebrew is sulam. Let's just quickly do a quick search for it. And we discover that this Hebrew word sulam only occurs once in the entire Bible. And that location is right here. That could be a clue that we don't really know immediately what this sulam is. And further investigation may be helpful. We won't do that right now, but we should ask about that when we meet together in class. And if you want to do some research ahead of time, that would be great. He dreamed that there is this sulam set up, and then in verse 13, the Lord stood beside him. Oh, wait a minute. Let's check some different translations here. Let's go to the NASB, for example. And behold, the Lord stood above it, above the ladder. Well, that's a very different translation from the Lord stood beside him. So you might ask yourself, what's going on? Are these translators, or one set of these translators, incompetent, or is there something rather profound at stake here? Okay, we'll keep poking. We're not going to look at everything, just giving you a sample of what a little digging can bring up and the sorts of questions that can get raised in your mind. Then the promise of God that all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you, that through Jacob and his descendants, Israel, God will bring a universal blessing to all peoples, all nations. However, we'll try a different translation. This time, let's try the Jewish Tanakh translation. Now, they have all the families of the earth shall bless themselves. Now, that's far less theologically profound and far less universal. The idea that, well, I'm going to bless myself, praying, that I would be as great a nation as Jacob's descendants. Now, actually, I think there are very good reasons to believe that the NRSV has it right here, but we can discuss those in class. Jacob awakes, and according to verse 17 in the NRSV, he's afraid. But I think here, the term afraid, the Hebrew yareh, is not simple fear, but better awe, dread of the other. There may be other translations that capture that a little bit better. Let's just pick Revised English Bible here. He was awestruck and said, "How awesome is this place?" I think that's a much better translation, conveying an encounter with the numinous. This is none other than the gate of heaven. Again, this is the idea of a thin space where the transcendent is close. I've made a note to myself that the Flammarion engraving from 1888 is a good illustration of how there can be places where a person can poke through the barrier between earth, the terrestrial, and heaven, the celestial, and get a glimpse of the beyond, the other. We should look at what this pillar is. It's called a matzevah. We'll go back to our resource guide, and we will look in one of the cross-reference collections about pillar. And we might notice, there's a couple references in Joshua to pillars. After Joshua completes the settlement of the land, he writes down God's words, then he takes a large stone and sets it up in the sanctuary of the Lord. So apparently these things, these standing stones, are not just aberrations or quirks in Jacob's mind, but it's part of the ancient Near Eastern apparatus available for bringing God in some iconographic way into the presence of a religious sanctuary. So we'll need to do more exploration of that. As a matter of fact, I've put a video right here on Brightspace for you to take a look at that illustrates what archaeologists have dug up as a matzevah, a standing stone that was part of an ancient shrine at Arad. You can look that up. It's one of the links that I've put on Brightspace. There it is, the standing stone at Arad. There's just so much in this text, it's hard to even stop this video. I know I'm going on too long. What about the naming of the place? this is none other than the house of God, it says in verse 17. Well, in Hebrew, house is bayit, or in the construct bait, and you'll notice that Bethel is Beit El, so house of God, Beit, house of God. There's an actual wordplay going on here that you wouldn't know just from the English translation. Bethel actually is named because of the thin quality of this place. Okay, well, I've got to stop. I just love this stuff, and I hope you will catch the bug too. Thanks for listening.